I still haven't shown my kids Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Now, I consider that. I mean, if I'm thinking, Paris is Burning, I would say is like to me is it was like the first like drag as a fit, like a cultural force. I think I was exposed to as a youngster, and I think I'd probably pick as like if I had to just instant select a drag movie of relevance, it would probably be Paris is Burning, like in the classroom. But for me, Priscilla, Queen of the Desert is so gorgeous. It's so gorgeous. It's so poignant. It's so funny. It's so body. It's a little too body. I haven't showed it to my kids. My kids are 10 and 12. And I'm like, it's a little. I've shown my kids a lot of like, whatever queer friendly content in children's entertainment and adult stuff. The first stand up special I ever let them watch was by was given by a gay man who sort of plays quite a bit with identity and concept. And so I want my kids exposed to it, but they also kind of fetishize it. Their generation fetishizes queerness the way that like I think our generation used to fetishize blackness. And
Mm.
it's a little pedestal dehumanizing, like you think like, I don't know about you, but I grew up in a place where like, especially white men wanted black guys to think they were cool. Like that was the like black boys and men were the yes massa for white boys when I was growing up. Like if a black kid came around, everyone just like wanted them. They could be the dorkiest black kid. You know what I mean? And then as a kid, because I grew up in Maine, there weren't black folks around. It really wasn't till later, and then I had just normal relationships with people of all color that I was like, oh, they are as lame as every other type of people. They are as wonderful as every other type of people. You know what I mean? Like once you live with people, there's no fetishization of them anymore because you're like, oh, they are just as gross. They might have a cooler, I like their fashion sense more or whatever, But like, um, but yeah, but Priscilla is one that I'm like raring to show my kids just because that movie is such a glorious, it's a celebration of art. I love it so much.
Yeah. Remember years ago in a conversation, a friend sharing that the greatest measure that we've all made it in terms of equality or equity or whatever you believe in
Yeah.
is like universal incompetence. Like,
Yes. Yeah.
like you don't have to be exceptional to sort of rise above, you can just.
Yep. Just another one.
But yeah, Priscilla, like I was saying before the show, I'm pretty sure you introduced me to that as you did so many amazing movies back in the show, our dorm room
Hmm.
in the 90s. And that is a special movie. I think I still have a copy of it around here. I got rid of a lot of my DVDs. But you know what I held on
Yeah.
to was Basquiat because at least a few
Oh,
months
yeah.
ago, you literally cannot find it streaming. It's
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep. It keeps coming and going. It's really frustrating. Yeah,
Yeah.
there's a bunch of culture. I mean, that was definitely something that's like pretty personal to me, and that like I know I'm more obsessed with Basquiat than the average person I talk to, but like um they're just missing. It's the weird thing about like internetization and
Yes.
streamingification is that it basically just goes, well, if it's not here, it's cut out of the cultural conversation. And you're like, wait, what?
Yeah,
That doesn't seem fair.
there were a few reasons I didn't want to just sort of port all my, carefully created MP3 library to Apple back in the day. And
Yeah.
that was one of them because it was like, well, we've created the new music library and
Yep.
that's that. I'm like, I don't think so. And I had a lot of live shows and all this.
Oh
But
yeah.
anyway, but anyway, back to Priscilla. Yes, gorgeous, gorgeous movie, poignant, has all the emotional arcs. Um,
Yeah.
but some of those scenes, yeah, where this costumes like streaming over the Australian
Yeah.
landscape, you're just like,
Yeah.
what? Wow.
Well, Baz Luhrmann, man. I mean, come on. Oh my gosh, and I forget. I feel like a misogynist right now. His one of his like producing partners, who's also his Catherine something. She also like his primary like design person. I don't know if she was on that film, but on most of his films, like the Baz Luhrmann look is very much a collaboration between himself and his wife.
She's the
So
Bernie Taupin of that.
yeah, she's just like, yeah, because how his films feel is one thing, but how his films look is like, I mean, there are iconic, pretty much every movie he's made, you can take still frames throughout any of them from 3 to 15 times and be like, put that on a wall, dude. Put it on a wall. Put it on a wall. Make it a 10 by 15 and sell it for $1 million. Like they make beautiful art together. But I wanted to say that I'm glad you even brought that up because I did want to talk about it to, for people to have to understand where I'm coming from, which is I have affection for drag performance. I am again wearing a women's top and bottom right now. I wear mostly women's clothes. Um, I have dressed as a woman on stage, on screen, um, and I say quote unquote as a woman with all appropriate quotation marks to realize these are ideas about, not the thing itself. But I wanted to say all that as one of the classic progressive style caveats of putting in parentheses. That's where I'm coming from, while still asking the cogent question of the day, which is drag the new blackface? Beep, beep, beep. Whack! My name is Brendan McNamara, and this is Totally Classic. I'm here with my partner.
Andy Swindler.
And we are asking the questions that a lot of people say you probably shouldn't talk about with one another. And I think that's making life a lot harder. I think if we shut down conversations on things, we actually don't understand what we think. We don't understand what other people think. And I always enjoy going, hey, here's what I think strongly. Here's why. But I might be wrong. Finding out you might be wrong is so delicious, y'all, because it like breaks a little wall down. And then you get to see it's like the end of Nimona. If you guys seen Nimona, the movie on Netflix, if you haven't, speaking of, sort of believed as the person wrote it, sort of like as a trans metaphor to some degree. Um, Fascinatingly enough, but great graphic novel, great movie, great. But there's the wall busted down, and finally people see outside the wall, and they're like, "Oh, look at all this gorgeousness outside." So let's make sure, as we build walls against things that we should be building walls against, we don't build walls against things that we shouldn't build walls against. Woo! So my pre-vote is Drag the New Blackface. I've been digging into this one solid. I got a big old fat thumbs up. Yes, Drag is the new Blackface, and I would even contend by the end of this episode, it's worse than Blackface. Um, but who knows? Might be wrong. What do you think pre-vote wise, Andy?
Well, I still don't like finding out that I'm wrong, for the record.
Oh, okay, sorry. Yeah, I don't mean to throw you under that
And
bus.
I know it's healthy. It's like, I don't know, eating, healthy food that I don't particularly enjoy. Uh, and I am gonna go with no as a pre-vote.
Okay.
The drag is not the new blackface, and I'm pretty fresh on this question, so let's see where
Oh,
we go.
fun. Okay, so I want to start with just maybe this is my theory that could walk us to conclusion the quickest. Number one, do you agree that both blackface and drag are minstrelsy by definition? And I would say the technical definition, I've sort of assembled this from a bunch of different sociological examinations and even looked at sort of the pop culture use of blackface, because blackface is used to mean itself, but it's also often used for any cultural caricature, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so the technical definition being this, let's see if we agree to it. The definition first, and then whether it applies second. Minstrelsy involves a member of a dominant or outside group adopting the characteristics of a marginalized group for entertainment, often relying on exaggeration and caricature. Does that feel like a fair summary of minstrelsy as the under which blackface is a version of?
I mean, I'll take it. I didn't know that minstrels were limited to characterizing marginalized groups. I mean, I think of a minstrel, I guess I just imagine somebody, if I'm like walking through the Renaissance fair, somebody just
Yes,
playing a
still, yeah.
lute or
Playing a
whatever.
lute. Yes, totally. I was totally lutish. Yeah, yeah, yeah. No, yeah, but I mean minstrelsy specifically in the realm of like what we accuse blackface of. Like,
I
why
see.
is
I see.
blackface wrong? Because it's this kind of minstrelsy. And they called it a minstrel show, but they were taking minstrels. This is sort of like again, this is like our gender conversations. This is taking a later application, which is like, why is blackface wrong? Well, it's this type of minstrelsy. It's this type of performance because of course emulating other people in a mocking fashion is part of the minstrel tradition, even in the lute, strolling a lute, strolling and strumming a lute tradition. But that specifically this kind of minstrelsy.
Well,
So
it's telling that I placed them at the Ren Fair rather than actual
yeah.
somebody in, whatever, 14th century England or something.
Yes, yeah, yeah, yeah. Strumming the lute at the local bar and dodging daggers or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so if we agree on that as like a general, like that's what we mean by black in the blackface version of it. And then so then question one, do we agree on that that's a definition? Yes. Question two, then, do we agree that both drag and blackface are within that category?
Yeah, it's funny. It invokes like intentionality for me. Like
Mm.
I don't know. I've actually only been to a couple of drag shows. Funny enough, I was just in New Orleans for the first time in
Oh
almost
yeah.
30 years, and like probably the first drag show I went to was actually in New Orleans. Um, it's so fascinating, and I don't know if you intend to dip into the numerous trans conversations we've had, but obviously it's adjacent. Um, yeah, that's what it brings up for me. Like that it does it have the intention of I don't know, commandeering or appropriating or adopting another group, or is it like, oh, these are people who really just want to dress this way and be this way, and the stage is a place for them to do it and earn money. I don't know. I guess that's maybe what I always thought it was.
So what? So intent. Let's say. So would you like? So you're saying? Let me clarify. It's super simple. So are you saying you would like to add a particular style of intention to the definition of minstrelsy?
I'm sorry, say that again.
Are you saying you'd like to add a definition of intention related to intentionality to the definition of minstrelsy, or am I misunderstanding?
Oh, that's just where I go. I
Oh,
think
okay.
for something remotely resembling linear clarity in this conversation, I like the
Yeah.
idea of we can just debate style. Like, let's pick
Okay.
an argument, not even to
Yeah.
say we that's the only one or we totally both are
Oh,
all in, but it's like
right, right.
that's the definition and we'll build on top of. So I'm with you.
Yes. Oh, okay.
Let's stick with that definition.
Okay.
I'm just speculating a little and mentioning
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
what comes
And
up. It's like,
I think we'll circle back to that as well. So then, so if minstrels we agree on, and do we agree both blackface and drag are members of a dominant or outside group adopting characteristics of marginalized people for entertainment or groups, often relying on exaggeration or caricature, meaning blackface was to me drag and blackface just are this. This is just the literal
meaning women are a marginalized group.
women. Yes, women
Yes.
are a marginalized group in Europe. So
Yeah.
okay, so there. And would you agree that like drag is the most popular form of modern minstrelsy in our culture by this definition? I just couldn't think of another one that was more.
Perhaps it's funny. The only other one that pops into my mind is like sports mascots. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that. I
Yeah.
think theoretically could fall into that because we some sports mascots are like endangered species, which are clearly marginalized. Um,
Yes.
that's probably a stretch. I really don't know, but I would say it's probably the most accepted. Like as we've
Yeah.
talked about quite
Yeah.
a bit. Like there's in many groups that's a protected class, of
Yes.
behavior. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. 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 A performance. Okay. And then blackface, would you say is definitely like that's our, at least in the United States, that is our former most popular version of minstrelsy.
It's well, I guess I'm putting it through the same lens. It's certainly
Right.
on the opposite end of that spectrum. It's been thoroughly canceled. Like we cannot
Yeah.
right up there
Yeah.
with the N-word. Like with blackface,
Yeah.
no. Big
You're
no
just
no.
not supposed to do it for some reason. Right.
Right.
So then, so they both, I think we generally then, maybe let's see. So are these both do we agree on minstrelsy? Yes. Are these both minstrelsy by definition? Yes. Blackface is the most popular reference point, I would say, for minstrelsy generally. It's certainly popular of the past, and drag is our current most popular, arguably, other than maybe mascots or that sort of thing, which I would agree that is. I don't think it's more. I think drag is hugely popular, meaning like it wins Emmys, millions of dollars. At every RuPaul's Drag Race is spun off at this
Yeah.
point. I don't know, 15 books, bestsellers, people's own TV show. Like it's to me, I was like It's not as big
It's
as
not just like
blackface.
in the dark clubs. Yeah, yeah, it's out
Yeah,
there.
yeah, it's a huge. I'm assuming drag is $1 billion industry or whatever. Like it's a huge thing, and just like blackface was hugely popular with all kinds of people, black, white, poor, whatever. Um, Drag is big with everyone, and it's even being propositioned as a children, like a form of children's entertainment as well. So it's that's a level of acceptance that's pretty humongous. And likewise with blackface, kids would go to blackface shows, minstrel shows. So then this gets us to four, which I think loops closer. This is actually pretty quick movement to your thing you were talking about. This is my question then, being it is so it's the new it already is the new blackface in terms of like it is the latest most popular version of minstrelsy, which blackface is. So to me that gets us already to technically it is the new blackface. But I would say immediately the question is what entirely unique features allows us to condemn one and celebrate the other, and why? A, do any unique features exist that allow that? And then why would they be somehow a justification as to, let's say, intention? How would intention matter to the definition of what something is? Like, does that make sense? So I think which takes us back. This is, I was like, oh, if we can get through these four, I think we can have a stable basis that we agree on and then jump into exactly what you were talking about. So I would almost, if it's okay, I could just kind of hand it back to you we can start pursuing intention, maybe through that lens of like, is there something unique or something we can explore and see if it's unique about drag that makes it somehow not condemnable by the same principles we condemn blackface?
Yeah. Well, one lens I go to is
Yeah.
if I'm not mistaken, when blackface was a thing,
Yeah.
um, black people really weren't performing, or at
Bert
least not
Williams,
nearly, not the, or not at the same level. Um,
Bert Williams was probably the most famous black man who did blackface, who was one of the biggest entertainers in the country. Certainly made a living at it. So black people and white people did perform, but I would say, actually, I don't know. Is there any woman who is like super famous for doing drag? I don't know any personally. So to me, it seems like very similar to drag in that way, where like there are drag kings, but it is not the same. A, it's not as funny. B, it's not as popular. It's not as it like if you watch it, it doesn't. It just doesn't hit the same
well, I guess
buzz button in the audience. If you know what I'm saying.
what I'm getting at is the like where audiences watching. I assume it was majority. I didn't know there about Burt Williams, but I assume it was still majority white people doing blackface. But were audiences watching white people do blackface and not hiring black people to actually perform just in any way, like as actors or like at that moment. I mean, what are we talking about? Early 20th century, mostly.
Yeah, early 20th century. Yeah, I think late 1800s through 19. I mean, honestly, as late as 1950s in the U. Like it lasted longer in the UK till like the 50s. I think it was still on TV as a
Uh,
performance thing. Yeah, about 70 or so, 70 some odd years or whatever.
so I don't know, there's a piece of almost like adding to the marginalization that seems important. So obviously, women now,
Yeah.
lots of very successful women actors, performers.
Yep.
I'm sure we could still make arguments about, you know, what is or not true about the equality there or access. But I don't know, that's where I go is to try to answer that is were
Yep.
the was there additional marginalization or disenfranchisement because yeah, people were in blackface when we weren't hiring black actors
Mm-hmm.
or performers. Yeah.
Blackface. Yeah. Yeah, black people were absolutely limited in that time in the spaces they would be able to perform, especially in particular venues. They would not be allowed access to all the same. And actually, I think Bert Williams was allowed to perform in blackface only on some occasions, meaning he had a blackface, but he had to wear blackface on his blackface to perform the blackface.
Mm.
Um, he's born in the Bahamas. One of the preeminent entertainers of the vaudeville era, the most popular comedians of all audiences of his time. Um, he's also credited him the first black man to have a leading role in a film in with Darktown Jubilee. Although it
Hmm.
might be Sam Lucas to the Lucas family who was like, no, wait, we were 2 years earlier. Um, so meaning, yes, so black people were working as black people, not to the same level as the people dressing up as them as a broad group, but that would also be different in terms of classes. If we're going to look at intersectionally, we have to, of course, we're looking at all their various and sundry identities. And then now, so then the question is to does the or wait maybe what you're pointing at and let me ask you if this is what you're pointing at that if that the degree to which marginalization is occurring in the time of said performance creates the ethical non-ethical switch potentially.
Potentially,
Yeah.
because
So
there's a relationship here. I guess I'm curious about. It's not
yeah,
they don't just exist in a vacuum.
yeah, they exist as so then the question would be almost like pumping it into black people in the era of blackface and women in the era of drag over time, and then saying how marginalized is the cohort that's being caricatured, I suppose, is sort of the formula. Because over time, let's just look at it then. So like black people over time versus women over time. Oh, this is already feels so salty, doesn't it? I'm going to say women are more marginalized than black people by, I don't know, times 195, 200, something like that. Because women have been subjugated and treated as barely human, or not inhuman property, even for off and on cultures around the world, thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands, maybe 10,000 years. And then black people have been subjugated really when most specifically as for being black people post the invention of race. So we've got like 400 or 500 years and actually regionally, more regionally applied as opposed to like universally black people are then somehow treated in some particular way. Um, so as a broad schema, mockery and caricaturing of women is doing so to a more marginalized people group, broadly speaking. But then you're saying maybe era specific.
Yes, and did that marginalization, or contribute to their marginalization, and
Yeah.
specifically in the context of performers having access? I guess
Yeah.
I'm
Well, it
really
certainly is the
dialing into like
case. Yeah.
the economic viability of performers of those groups.
Of that type. Yeah. Well, in drag, I mean, how many drag kings do you know? I guess would be the question then. Are women marginalized in that particular space? At least by their own self testimony, they are. Um, in terms of, there's a great piece in Vice magazine 2019. Let's see, Lolo, who's a drag king. At the beginning of my career, I'd see a lot of male performers doing drag and donning, quote, womanhood, but they'd never branched beyond the stereotype. It was either the trashy slut, which I identify strongly with, homemaker, or ditzy woman. I watched one queen doing the trashy thing, and I thought, who are you? Who, as a man who has no idea what it's like to grow up, exactly. What are you doing as a man who has no idea what it's like to grow up being told you can either be sexy or intelligent? A lot of the worst misogyny was off stage, she adds. Performers would make comments about vaginas or female bodies being disgusting, and I found it so bizarre they tried to embody a certain type of womanhood, but had no concept of the enjoyment of a fabulous cunt. That's Lolo. So at least in the space, that's just some anecdotal evidence, and I would just say anecdotal from my life experience, the number of women who are marginalized in that space, the drag space is strong,
Hmm.
as would be evidenced by their representation in the space being quite limited. And drag, of course, is a tradition that goes way, I mean, we're talking thousands of years of drag, um, throughout all time periods where women couldn't vote, have a, you know, and
But
has drag just gotten less bad over time? Like, was drag really bad basically when women were literally treated like property and weren't allowed to vote or perform on stage? Like, was it like in Shakespeare's time, right? When men would perform the female roles, was that worse than ethically in that time period than it would be now in the kind of ideas that you're asking?
hmm. So, well, one thing that there's a seems to be a correlation there. So the
Yeah.
marginalization of women much longer, the existence of drag much longer. Well, I assume you didn't mention how long drag blackface has been around, but we at least pinpointed what we're referring to as a much more
Yeah.
modern.
Yeah.
Um, are there? I wonder, is there anybody that pushes against drag? I mean,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and what does that
Most,
look like? Yeah.
yeah. Mostly feminist authors. Bell Hooks has highlighted this same
Hmm.
issue. Um, yeah. All women, uh, mostly lesbians, um, have made this point before. I didn't know this point had been made. I just thought to me it was pretty obvious that they're the same. Um, uh, and didn't know other people had done it. But yeah, people have done their like doctoral thesis on the things. Have dang, I just pulled up the quote now. I can't find it. But um, yes, it has been criticized by women, especially that it basically is a version of woman face.
Hmm.
I just think that's not very catchy. I think calling it woman
It's
face
too
just
many
never.
syllables.
Yeah, so it's just like drag is the new blackface. It's certainly equally as reductive. It has been part and parcel to the dehumanization of women and the removal of women from full agency, only as representative agency throughout time, and it still exists now. And yes, there are probably some tethers, like you were thinking, like there are tethers, even though there's not quite even overlapping with trans identification. But I do think this is part of my theory. This is quite, I was like, well, wait a second. Should we look all the way back here? Because one of my theories is the reason the idea of pronouns that aren't based on biology, which is how pronouns have functioned for 10 to 15,000 years, um, got such quick uptake was because of the Daniel Day-Lewis method acting style use of pronouns in drag communities or drag adjacent communities. And so I was like, oh, this is why people who maybe are like deeply into their like queer core, hardcore friends don't realize that like nobody does that outside of those spaces where like someone's a she just because they have a like a drag persona and you call them she and everyone's just like, what do you mean she's a she right now, just like it's not even a question. But that's like, Daniel Day-Lewis being Mr. Lincoln while he's shooting Lincoln, like it's not. And so I think it's one of the, anyway, I'm always trying to get to the core of these confusions we have as a society because I think most of them are actually just based on one or more people having a misapprehension about what they're talking about as opposed to actually being um, disagreeing. That's my theory anyway. uh, so I don't know. Does that help land that portion of the plane?
Yeah, I mean it's actually helpful to hear some of the criticism. I am a fan of bell hooks, so that's like, that makes
Yeah.
me not tilt my head.
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
huh. I don't know. It's taking a while to sink in because I thought of it as innocent, I suppose, was the word that comes up. So yeah, I have to admit when I first saw this question, I was like, really? That's what we're going to talk about? But as usual, there's more depth here than meets the eye.
Yeah. Well, the same. This is the same thing. Is take any of the questions you have that you'd be like, oh, well, drag's different because of this, and then apply it to blackface and see if it measures out. So, did all ages enjoy it in its day? Yes. Did black people enjoy it as well? Yes. Did so then if women enjoy drag, you're like, does that change it? Can't change it. It's the same. Well, let's actually rewind. Within the definition of minstrelsy, why does it need anything else besides to fit the definition of minstrelsy in order to be the new blackface? If we have blackface as a firm referent for what minstrelsy was in a popular way and what minstrelsy is now in a very popular way. If and we've already included the whole concept of marginalized in the definition, which is already like using progressive framing to make this case because it does seem like things I would say progressives in general would be opposed to as a concept. So then if it is that, does it even matter what the intention is? Like, why would the intention have anything to do? Because then doesn't that assume the intention of blackface was just like, we invented this form to subjugate the black man? You know what I mean? But that's not really what happened. So then if it is the thing, does intention matter? Question mark.
Well, it is pretty straightforward. I just thought it'd be a really short show. Um,
Yeah.
so within that definition, again, when the member of dominant or outside group adopts the characteristics of a marginalized group for entertainment, yes.
Yeah. So then why, then that's the question. So why isn't it the treated the same? Or did we just stumble upon, I mean, my hope of hopes, another area where people state an ethical principle, but then they don't apply it in egalitarian fashion on purpose?
Well, one of the things I'm curious about
Yeah.
is somebody who adamantly defends trans
Yep.
identity. Um, like how do they feel about drag? You know, is it they seem like adjacent but different categories where somebody is saying I am like a man saying I am a woman or I am transitioning to a woman, however they would put it. I don't know. Like, is that to me that's actually the distinction. Like I hold them as different categories because one is performance.
Yep.
And it's entirely possible that I mean it's like a Venn diagram, right? I'm sure there are like drag
Oh
performers
yeah,
who
there's
are
probably
trans,
overlap.
right?
Yeah.
Obviously, um
Yeah, there's probably overlap, I would assume.
but yeah, that's I don't know, that's a question that comes up for me.
Hmm. Wait, ask, so the question is, how do trans people feel about drag?
Yes, that's a good one. And actually, more how do trans advocates and supporters feel
Yeah.
about drag? That's the one I was actually getting at.
Yeah. Yeah, good question. I don't know. I don't know. In many ways, I do see drag as like the gateway drug. It's the weed. It's the gateway drug towards trans concept. Meaning, the reason I would, and this gets ties this into why I would say drag is worse than blackface ethically, because it violates all the same principles to a greater degree on a more marginalized people. So if the degree of marginalization is relevant, and the caricatures have been performed in order to define an entire people as something resembling a costume, right? The costume of the commodification of an entire identity, of a real identity also, because race is a tricky one in terms of it does exist, but it also is very different. It's conflated with quite a few things.
Right.
Womanhood does exist, uh, like to 99.98% certainty. So way more provable as a thing that exists that one can marginalize. Uh, so, but here's the difference. Al Jolson, who performed in blackface for years, made millions, entertainer, started from the bottom. Now he's here. Congratulations. So poor, poor white, a marginalized, white moves up the ladder performing this particular thing. But nowhere did anyone ever claim to be exhibiting a more true form of blackness or inhabiting a blackness that was so black it was blacker than black people. Whereas in drag, this is pretty consistent. I just had a quote, and I cannot find it, which is super frustrating, from RuPaul, essentially saying that like it's an active form of becoming. Many drag performers and trans people both, this is a Venn diagram overlap, speak of how their femininity or their womanhood is more powerfully womanish womanhood than those who are born into it because they have chosen it, which is it's an active adoption of, let's be honest, a costume. I would say in both cases, then, and also the Venn diagram overlap as well into this that if if womanhood is just a costume, this is kind of why I think it is overlapped with trans, and I think people this is why people get confused about it because part of transgender identity does tend to treat woman as a costume, maybe a little bit of a meat costume, but it's a costume. It's not. They've taken it from being an actual identity. They've taken it away. They've been like drained it of its actual essence and then said it's all this other stuff and we can just put it on and I can put it on and I can be it and I can be it. Now this in trans you're then taking it into equal, or if you're what's it, alok menon or whatever, then it's superior. So equal or superior genderhood than the people who are born that gender. So I actually think the overlap is where it points to being far more ethically wrong than blackface. because it doesn't try to subsume the identity or say the identity is now earned. That Robert Downey Jr. was blacker than his black co-stars, having chosen it on the set of Tropic Thunder.
Well, there's a lot there. A comment earlier
Yeah,
about trans advocates and like questioning that was
yeah.
my assumption that trans advocates, we might just broadly say progressive, would also be the first to say blackface was horrible. So
I would assume so
that's
as
where
well.
that chain kind of is for me. Like, okay, that's yeah. So how would they feel about drag? And me
Yep.
not being that far from that world is why I'm asking that because I'm kind of like, I don't know. I never thought that much about it, to be honest. Uh,
Yeah.
but
Which I
that's
think people did same thing for blackface. People just didn't think about it. Why would you? It's just a popular form of entertainment where people pretend to be a caricature idea of what quote unquote blackness is, and drag is just men doing a caricatured version of what femininity or womanhood is. Um, there's no real reason to have to think about it until you want to look at it from kind of, I think, what the benefit of the Luciferian progressive questioning tactic is. Hold on a second. Can we just take nothing for granted for a moment and talk about this? So, since that is the little cohort who asked those questions, I don't see how it isn't hypocrisy on purpose to not apply it to the things that they like. So, to me, it's just the only reason that progressives don't condemn drag is because they like it.
is there anything about the content that matters? Like, was blackface, would we, again, with
Yeah.
2026 eyes, look at, which is not always fair, look at blackface content as degrading or cheapening or making fun of, whereas is there something about drag where it's elevating, like you were saying, I mean, almost that's like probably taking it too far to say, oh, we're better women, but but that actually baked somewhere deep in there is an idea that like, hey, being a woman is great, you know. Um,
Yeah, but that's in both. Meaning, if you look at the information on the time when people were performing blackface, they was widely regarded as an affection and appreciation for black culture. It
so
wasn't. It
that's
wasn't. It wasn't.
meaningful. Yeah.
Yeah. And so it's the same. Like it's the same. I would assume there's the same amount of like misogyny you hear in a drag room as you would in a black. You'd hear racism in a black room, a blackface room, right? I have to assume it's probably living in the water of both. But the pronouncement in both cases is to entertain, right? This is the problem sometimes where like our brains or progressive brains can go afoul and that we start to fall into the idea that criticism of a thing, meaning in the formal sense, is the thing itself. We tend to think of it like, oh, what is that? Even in sci-fi, right? You're like, but what was it saying? What is this a metaphor for? And you're like, I don't know. It's about he had to suck the milk off of this half algae, anthropomorphized algae in order to survive. Yes, but what does that mean? What are you draining the resources of nature to satisfy your egotistical capitalist impulses? Right? That's where I don't know, my brain goes a lot of the times. But other than that, it was meant to
I
entertain.
want to watch
Both
that movie. What was it?
I know, right? It sounds interesting. But it was I know like it was a little what was it? Not Cronenberg, not Lynch. Was it a Cronenberg film? Anyway, there's that thing where the guy like drinks essentially semen off the forehead of this like supernatural creature because he's getting all high on bug juice. Anyway, whatever that one is. Yep, that's right. It's a real book, real movie. Anyway, so in both cases, meant to entertain. In both cases, proclaimed to be an affection or even a bit of a parodying the ideas of blackness or womanness, femininity or race, right? And also kind of, but a lot of times, let's be honest, having been to a number of drag shows myself, uh, ribald. If people back in the blackface era saw modern drag, they would be horrified. Just like we, looking back on them watching our blackface, I'm sure they would be somewhat horrified. Um, unless they grew up on Homeboys in Space, in which they're like, or Tyler Perry. I mean, whatever. This is the Tyler Perry accusation. Kind of doing a form of the Medea thing. Really slides back and forth over being a continuation of the black man doing blackface, the Bert Williams tradition. And in his case, doing both, right? A little bit of blackface, a little bit of drag with Medea. So
But black people love that shit, right?
yeah, I mean, some black people hate it and think it's like literally it's coon culture and it's destroying. It's literally just like the sort of hotep, whatever
Yeah.
respectability politics. People would be like heck no to that. But in many ways, Medea kind of is our nice little bridge, and that it is arguably blackface and drag at the same time. Um, so yeah,
It,
affection is always there.
it's fascinating. Just anecdotally, like
Yeah,
somehow the message has come through me through very indirect channels that like
yeah,
Tyler Perry and Medea have a huge support in the Black community.
yeah. Isn't that interesting? Yeah, yeah.
I don't know.
Black, yep. Still, but drag in general is hugely disfavored by black people. Just like black people are the most likely racial cohort to say that gender and sex are the same thing. You cannot change your gender. And actually, the cohort most likely to say that it's morally wrong to even suggest you would do so or what have you. So it's pretty fascinating. And this is also like whatever we've seen this in Dave Chappelle is like let's see the crown prince of black comedians of our era has been like open like whatever his last four specials in some way have touched on the fact that like I think he's partially touching on the fact that the fetishization of black people as like superior has now moved over to queer and trans people as superior. And so I think a little bit it's like, oh, what happened? We used to be the favored nation. But it is also going, well, wait a second. We also used to be on the priority list. And it still sounds like you're pretending to prioritize us even more so in 2020. And yet it seems like y'all are like, you don't really mean us. You don't really mean black lives. You don't mean black lives just lives that are black. You have a very like this specifically means something else, I guess now,
Mm.
because y'all don't care what we actually say or what we believe or what we say about ourselves or what we say about the world. You're just like, no, we're going to use you. But again, I think the same thing about trans and drag advocates. Um, I don't think I think it's really largely like a power game more than anything else, personally. Just because again, I can't find anything that's different. Like what's different? Other than obviously we're talking black or woman. Yes, I understand those things are different. But like I can't find any ethical principles that aren't violated by both, meaning it just seems to be we like our version. We don't like that version. Like we just don't like blackface, so it's condemned. But we like drag, so we won't condemn it. But again, to me, this is, or maybe that's the question. Does this inevitably lead to what we would traditionally call like ethical or moral hypocrisy?
Well, that's what I've been probing.
Yeah.
Well, I'll keep thinking about it. Just about if who accepts this, especially amongst the progressive cohorts, which I trust would be the first to point out how horrific blackface was. Um,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
there's a
Well, what about you though, just personally? Meaning like why do you think blackface is bad? And instant pattern recognitioning that, like why don't all those formats in terms of principles, if you had to extract them as principles, meaning, oh, they violate this. Because it can't just be they violate this re-blackness, because then it makes blackness this weird category that like no one else, you know what I'm saying? Like I'm assuming maybe you don't think this way, maybe that's part of the problem, like my communication style. As I'm like, well, you have to extract the principle, meaning like, well, wait, why am I saying this is wrong, as opposed to I don't like this,
well, that's so
you know?
yeah. So it's trying to probe a bit at harm. That's something
Yeah,
you and I often come back to, even if
yeah,
like broadly speaking, we both believe in reducing harm.
yes,
Um, maybe different means and different definitions and what even constitutes harm, et cetera. But
sure,
so
sure.
that's why I was probing into, okay, well, what harm did exist genuinely for particularly for the marginalized, for Black people during the era of blackface.
Yeah,
So that's why I was questioning economic harm. Like, oh, were there Black performers that were not being being hired? Did they not have jobs basically because white people were in blackface? And then I'm curious just how it impacted them. Did they feel like it was degrading or perpetuating stereotypes, etc.? So I
yeah,
would say that's a very concise bullet list of like, I think the progressive reasoning for why blackface was canceled. The second one maybe is countered by to your point that if Black people A, enjoyed blackface performances, and B, actually received it as the intended form of endearment. Um, and of course, and I hope everybody knows when we say like Black people, like, okay, obviously not all Black people thought the same thing.
Right. Yeah. 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 Well,
But
listen, there are plenty of women who love drag and plenty of women who hate it because it's sexist or whatever. But like, yeah, absolutely, all
yeah,
different kinds of people exist.
so that's to me like those. I guess I again haven't put a ton of thought into it, but I
Yeah.
figure that those were like the reasons it was uh, canceled. I don't even know if it was canceled sort of in a moment or if that happened over time. Back then, it probably took a little longer. Things get canceled pretty quickly these days. Um,
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's why I think it's fascinating. Why does drag isn't even really being examined in the space regarding this?
it's not,
Again,
no,
that's
it's not. So that's why I was like, why are we talking about this? I'm like, oh yeah, that's
because
worth examining.
yeah, you're like because then you're just leaving it out because then it seems to be based on a series of presumptions that none of which I can find are true.
Hmm.
Because women, I mean, you'd be like, well, black people couldn't perform in those places. Okay, well, how well received or how many women are performing in drag spaces? And then how many times are you hiring a drag performance instead of an all female review?
Well, and to be clear, I don't just mean, and this is even harder to
Yeah.
really figure out, but I don't even just mean in those spaces, but like,
Hmm.
would did blackface entertainment sort of take up all the space that any other black performer might have occupied? Like,
Hmm.
we're gonna go see blackface minstrel shows rather than this black actor who is doing Shakespeare over here or something like that.
Right. Got it. Got it. Got it. Yeah,
But
I
again,
don't.
I mean that's kind of like it feels like reaching and it feels pretty hard to validate.
It would be definitely pretty hard to quantify, but then you just be like, how many examples do you have to find? Probably easily find three, and you can find three right now in Chicago of like, look at the time as a folk musician woman is performing and a drag show, drag brunch is happening. And as long as there's three incidents of drag shows happening at the same time that women performers could be seen. And then this is where the trans thing gets weird, right? Because then it becomes if men can become women, then you're like, well, no, there's either way you're seeing a woman performer, which means then you're just like a blackface thing. You've then said, well, if I perform in blackface long enough, and then if I would just perform blackface every day, then I transition into blackface and I make it legally required for you to recognize my blackness, or you can be punished without it. It does take. This is the kind of interesting drag connection. So then you can say when you go to look for those lists, you'd be like, well, no, 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 because blackface people are black. So that was black. That was black. So I'm saying if you apply the same principles, the trans principles, for example, then no black people were on stage. Al Jolson was black when he was performing blackface because he inhabited like his concept of blackness because blackness is a social construct built on top of like phenotypical observable characteristics. So then I'm just like, well, wait, doesn't this? My question is, doesn't this literally make it necessary that these things are running the same simulation? Or to me, the only escape hatch seems to be no, because women are now the dominant class over men.
So this might be
In
a
which
good
case,
segue into Smash the Matriarchy.
right? Yeah. In which case, drag was invented to be misogynist, helped perpetrate misogyny for thousands and thousands and thousands and thousands of years. But now it's punching up. Now, punching up, punching down has nothing to do really with anything. I've been in comedy my whole life. That is just something people outside of comedy pretend like is a comedy thing. It has nothing to do with anything. Um, it's not a real ethical principle. It's just people talk about it in memes and think pieces. Uh, but then that would have to be the suggestion that women are now on top. But I don't feel like that's what progressives are saying. So they can't make that. So then I'm just like, to me, the only steelman I can make is one that the people who are advocating that blackface is wrong for these reasons, most dominantly as critical of inhabiting some selfness, they don't seem to be saying it. So then I'm just like, again, is this at least potentially another one where quote unquote progressives, this very broad schema, seem to once again have something that they hold as ethically wrong, but they don't apply those principles in egalitarian fashion. Meaning, is it even ethical? Or is it, maybe that's even a question, because you're more of a moral relativist than I am. Is it even like, can something be ethical, fully functionally, like we've talked about, with if it's not based on a moral principle or some, at the very least, a universal principle, that sort of Kantian sense? Like if you can't universalize the principle you're applying, then it doesn't. It sounds like preference, like power for preference rather than an actual ethical principle. But again, I don't know if we agree on that.
Yeah, it does seem like a contradiction.
So should we? What do we do about that interpersonally? Like if blackface? Well, that's the question then. Is blackface ethically condemnable, and should we speak against it or try to keep it out of our pocket of performance?
I don't know. It seems like is it still happening in any significant way?
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, Drewski's been doing whiteface, which is pretty similar. Um, I think it has to be on the table. I mean, blackface always remains on the table. People can have their response to it all they want, but this is
Right.
actually, honestly,
So we
yeah.
either cancel drag or we bring back blackface.
I mean, they're either both acceptable or they're either both not, as near as I can tell. I mean, just in terms of like really rigorously being like, all right, what's the problem? And I don't disagree that blackface is a problem, but I'm just like, if it's a problem, then drag is also the problem larger.
Hmm.
So my question is, yeah, why is that level of like drag people saying, or even trans people saying, like we're a more true womanhood? I mean, that's a pretty clean corollary, right? To being like, I'm more black than a black person because I chose it, and I'm like having to observe it and put it on. I choose it every day. You know what I mean? I have to re-choose it. It's not imposed on me. Like I am taking it up. Like there's something kind of interesting about that. There's something provocative artistically or even poetically about that. But like, wouldn't that make it more offensive by the internal progressive ethic claim to claim to be equal or superior to the very marginalized group that you are portraying?
Logically,
Yeah.
but again, I think gender's become this protected class. So, but in a yeah, I don't know.
But
Yeah,
yeah,
that's
but then
pretty
that's
tricky.
not gender. You know what I'm saying? This might be part of the confusion too. I was like, what does gender have to do with drag?
Well, that was my question earlier. Like, oh, how
Yeah.
many drag people are trans people? Like
Well, but if they're transgender, then gender means sex, because transgender means a personal sense of self across from, trans from, sex assigned at birth, gender meaning sex assigned at birth. So then this is, and we've found this problem over and over again. There's two competing things in progressivism. Gender is identity or gender identity exists. But if transgender doesn't mean gender as gender identity, because then you'd be across from your identity. So like,
that, so
you know what I'm
yeah,
saying?
I'm with you.
Yeah.
And I bring it up not to go back and all that,
No.
but to I I guess to me, even literally the definition
Mm.
drag show, drag queen, drag performer is different than whatever's being put forth with trans. Meaning,
Yes.
oh, I'm performing a show and this is the costume.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I just think they overlap in terms of my theory, in terms of social sequencing. Meaning, look at Martha P. Johnson, right? Stonewall activist, black man, dressed as a woman, use a woman's name, cross-dresser, right? And even probably back in that era, could have been called transsexual or transvestite, depending on who was speaking about the man. Has been post hoc claimed as a transgender pioneer, not transgender. Said, "I am a man." Referred to himself as a he, other than on stage in performance mode, right? Was he like, I'm a man, and this is what I like. So his gender, in that sense, identity sense, was man. His gender, literally, as in his gender identity, that means his sex identity was also literally man. So there we have a problem where there's been retconning of literal people to then now start conflating these concepts, making them. This is why drag is kind of interestingly informative to trans, because my suggestion both is that there's at least a percentage of the claim is conflation of gender itself as costume of stereotypes of gender. So then people are like, oh, he's performing female gender. You're like, no. In drag, you're performing most of the time hyperbolic caricatures of gender norms in the sociological sense, which is a subcategory of a subcategory of a subcategory, maybe even a fourth subcategory. So to me, that's why the continuum is kind of interesting. Because yes, you're actually, both of us would be accurate in that trans and cross-dressing have nothing de facto to do with each other. They're separate categories just that have overlap. But I think my part of my theory is one of the reasons people aren't going after drag is because of the Venn diagram overlap. Because if you go after something consistently there, it will reveal A, you've abandoned protecting women as a marginalized class, and then B, which most people have already kind of accepted from outside of progressivism, that's just progressivism's not interested in feminism. It's not the priority anymore, in any traditional sense. It's just we feel like we've got it. Listen, which is also fine in terms of like, have you already kind of achieved what you're going to achieve with that attempt? Possible.
Well,
Um,
that's always the question I'm holding is like, well, when do we, is there a
yeah,
line? When do we know we've crossed it? And how do we,
yeah,
because that's a lot of this work is based on the idea that once things are a certain way, we will behave differently. And I think that's some
yeah.
of the tension we hold because you're like, well, how, why is it that way? Where's the line? When will we know we crossed it? And why the hell wouldn't we just get started today? You know?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and so much of it is literally saying we're throwing out all the things that have got us this far. Like we're throwing liberalism out, we're throwing objectivity out, we're throwing rules of logic out, we're throwing appeal to moral authority out. We're just like chucking out all the tools that we've used to get to where we have gone. And I think we have improved as a species across a bunch of different metrics, which is great. So I'm not sure why we want to throw all the tools out because it's not. And then the problem is, I think we've already gone too far because now someone has reached out and grabbed subjective sense of self as a protected innate characteristic that other people have to validate. So at that point, we've circled all the way back off over to theocracy, to where like you can't question, which means ultimately you can't question queer people the way you're not supposed to question like a Catholic priest or whatever. So I don't know, a lot of queer people like drag, so it must be great. I think for some people that it might be that like low level of a thought. I could be wrong. I'm just guesstimating. I'm trying to figure it out. Um,
Well, I mean, I find myself going there like, oh, black people liked it. Oh, well, then I guess it's okay. I
yeah,
mean, it's still sort of outsourcing the ethical reasoning to be like, oh, well,
yeah,
if the group that I thought was being made fun of is okay with it, then I don't know. I
yeah,
guess it's fine. Which, is not totally unreasonable in the context of like, oh, like, what can we measure? Can we in any way find out if harm was done to that group?
yeah.
Um,
Well, that's a question then. Well, can we ever then include offense as harm? We can't include offense as harm in the entire paradigm. I mean,
Dave Chappelle would say no.
right? We can't. Well, we can't. Well, and progressives would say no, right? Because it is offensive to every single person to say that gender doesn't mean biological sex anymore, because that's 99% of the use by human beings. And so that's offensive every time you say, well, no, a trans man is a man. And if you don't say that, you're bad. So then you're offending that person in terms of how they perceive reality structurally, in terms of it takes a blink for them to figure this out intuitively. And then you're saying that a word doesn't mean something that means it across pretty much every field of human survey. And then, so it's offense. So I'm telling you, offense is not harm, relevant harm in the progressive system overall. You may have noticed this. We've talked about this a bunch of times. It's only particular people's harm that is important. It's like there's a moral hierarchy of harm. Meaning like if a black person has offense, then that is treated as like some sort of statistical like three coins. But like if a person who is perceived not to have a marginalized identity is, so if they're part of the majority and they are offended, their offense is given one coin. Do you feel, I mean, I feel like that's an accurate, this is at least my attempt to kind of understand and speak to it from like a sixth grade level.
Oh yeah, I even wrote about that a few years ago with like the
Yeah.
wheel of privilege and trying to calculate privilege
Yeah.
and
So,
oppression.
yeah. So but doesn't that turn out that people's pain or offense has different moral priority within the group based on who they are identity wise?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now is that so? Maybe that gets to this, right? So then I'm sort of thinking that that's interwoven with this concept, and then is that allowed or is that unethical to say like, well, you're part of the white person who is in here for corrective supremacy because black people can't manage themselves because white people are superior and this is our burden. That's literally how it was sold, right? White man's burden was like the white man's burden was they had to lead the savage races or the lesser people to like a place of better benefit. And so, yes, it meant they were sort of having to be subjugated and treated as less than, and their offense, like a black person's offense, was just simply not as a high a priority as a white person's offense. A white person's offense on a sidewalk, you could be thrown in jail or beat half to death or murdered. Um, so we had this priority system that the white people said was corrective for past imbalance, and we're just going to do this till we kind of get the black people to the promised land, and then hopefully they will help educate them enough that they can do it on their own, right? The Europeans tried this with the Native Americans as well. So it's like, isn't it the same system?
It's at least an echo.
Yeah. Echo, 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 echo.
Well, I think
Sh
we've actually
so
answered the original question and
I
gone
think so.
quite a bit deeper.
Yeah. Well, so would we agree? Have we come? Would it be tenable to say that drag is the new blackface?
Yes.
Yes, and I would say yes. And then the question is it worse? Like, does the degree of marginalization of the person mocked, women, being larger, does the fact that women is a more certain category than black, so more marginalized and more real of a category to be marginalized, and the claims internally, and even now some overlap with a systematic demand that equality to woman by people who perform femininity, and then even superiority to women in those who perform femininity, both in drag and trans contexts. Does that make it worse by the same principles?
I am bending towards yes for a slightly different reason, which
Mm,
is this
yeah.
idea that it's not being discussed, it's not being interrogated, it's not well, I don't know, that's not fair. Obviously, some people are,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
the people you list are like feminists and academics, and I don't know. I don't think in pop culture people are talking about this very much. And
Yeah.
for better or worse, whether or not we should have canceled blackface, at least somebody like asked the question, you know?
Yeah. Out loud. And it took quite a while for that to be dismantled as well. Because again, the general population was like, what are you talking about? This is just whatever. Now they didn't say we're deconstructing blackness, but they didn't use the same terminology. But they were like, what do you mean? It's just fun. And this is how poor entertainers found a way to like do something interesting that people thought was enjoyable. And people like making fun of women. I think because women have so much interpersonal power. I think that's why people like making fun of men because their physical like ability to physically dominate. General again, these are broad generalities, but
Yeah,
often
how
one
can
of
we
the
take people down a peg, however they got, whatever they're
yeah,
standing
yeah,
on? Yeah, for
yeah. So
sure.
assassinate a king, mock a queen. I don't know. Mock a
And,
queen. You better
and
watch it.
you, is it worse?
Yeah, I'm gonna say it's worse by the same metrics. And this is funny too to me. This is one of those things where I can jump into the progressive mindset, empathically leap into that position, and then look at it logically and figure out what the ethics are. And in some ways, I was like, I don't disagree with you that blackface. I don't think blackface is wrong, morally wrong. It's just not really a moral question. It might be an ethical question in terms of reducing a person to an object kind of thing. Um, I think it's problematic. I like that word. I know it sounds like a little too weak, but you're like, you're getting into some stuff where it's fine to mock anybody, but at some point when it is part and parcel to subjugation and elevating false ideas about who a people are, especially when something gets popular, right? Um, that's where it's damaging. So I agree sometimes with the deconstruction of blackface to figure out why it's bad. It's just that you have to then swivel those rules, and I cannot find a single get out. You have to apply them to drag. So then, if you don't, the question is, do you not believe those rules at all? I think is a tenable question, but a question for another time.
And that is another story that shall be told at another time.
At another time, on another in another age. All right, man. Hey, we found our ways. We found our way. Walked through a circle together. Thank you for
All
walking through the
right.
garden of drag with me.
It's like a labyrinth.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Love you.
I
Thank
love
you
you.
for stretching my brain and my heart.
We did it. And today's going to be a more beautiful day where we have both of us have extensive because of this practicing early. We're going to have extra patience with all the people in our lives that we love.
Hmm. Bye.
Bye. Love you, man.